Hi, I'm Anatole, and this is my review of Twilight Zone, the original series, Season 1, Episode 11, titled What You Need, actually Episode 12. I was just reviewing how many episodes I've been watching, and I'm kind of surprised I'm at Episode 12. It feels pretty significant. I think the longest series I've reviewed up to this point has been a 10 episode series, so that's quite a testament to my love of this show. Now, I want to disclose that I found a new source of reference material that really helped me immensely for this episode, and that is the Twilight Zone podcast. And if you look on the internet for Twilight Zone podcast, you will find the website twilightzonepodcast.com, and the guy who runs that has really good commentary, and he also links to resources outside of the show. So because of that website, I was made aware that this was a remake of the story was made originally by another anthology series, Tales of Tomorrow. And so after watching this episode a couple times, I went and watched the Tales of Tomorrow episode so I could compare just how Rod Serling handled his adaptation of this material. And the changes he made were pretty interesting, actually. Maybe in some ways more interesting than the episode. I liked the episode. However, because one of my goals in reviewing this series, and for me this is a writer-driven series, and I think that should not be a shock. Rod Serling was hired as a hotshot writer to make a writing-driven series. And along the way, it became a very well-acted and well-filmed series. It was a quality show. But first and foremost, I think it should be known as a writer-driven series. And so one of my goals is to look at the process Rod Serling took in writing each episode and examining where that process may have hindered him and in what ways his writing skills may have helped him in each episode. And as I undertook this review series, one thing that was a surprise to me that I was not aware of, but it makes sense in hindsight, is that Rod Serling wrote each episode so quickly, with so few drafts, two drafts. And now when I look at the show and the episodes that I see problems with, I can usually identify the hastiness and the lack of revision as the reason why the episode appears to be half-baked or something doesn't work. And I see some of that in this episode. And again, it was illuminating for me, and you can see it on YouTube, the Tales of Tomorrow adaptation of What You Need. So, as far as I'm aware, that adaptation hews more closely to the... Actually, I also read the original story, because on the the Twilight Zone podcast website, he reads the original story. So, yeah, well, I didn't realize till just now, while speaking out my review here, that my research for this episode was a bit more detailed than I originally thought. So I read the original story, I watched the first adaptation, and then the Twilight Zone. And yes, definitely the Tales of Tomorrow hewed more closely to the original story. And where the two differ is quite interesting. In the adaptation for television, I can't remember the two characters' names. We have Fred Renard and Pedot, that's right. And Fred Renard is the villain. And in the adaptation, both Pedot and Renard, did I get that right? Renard? Yeah, Renard have significant others. I'm guessing, I think Renard has a girlfriend and Pedot has a wife. But in the Rod Serling adaptation, they're both single. And I think you can make the argument can be made, they're both single because of the lifestyle they lead. Their drives, their passions make it impossible for them to be in a fulfilled relationship. And so I thought that was quite interesting. And I think that says more about Rod Serling than it does about any flaw in the original material. I don't think the characters were made stronger by making them single. I don't think they were hurt. I think it only, in some ways, shows one of the concerns of Rod Serling. And I think, and I've heard this before, that with Rod, if you go back to him and his father, you can't go too far in finding a main theme in a lot of his work. And I've said before, I intend to watch his Playhouse movie, telemovie Patterns, which is about a young man trying to make it in the way of the business world, because a lot of these early episodes reflect those themes of work compromising our lives and losing our lives to work. And I can't help but feel that maybe Rod Serling felt distant from his father because his father was working too much. I might be wrong about that. That's my impression of what I know about his biography. And another bit of research I did was I listened to the interview that Rod Serling made with CBS's 60 Minutes correspondent Mike Wallace. And I think that's also of note, although it's a little bit of an aside, but the fact that a television writer appeared on a talk program like that with Mike Wallace says two things. One, that the level of the quality level of earlier programs was a bit higher, and that they would invite a television writer as a host, as a guest on this talk show, says a lot about who they viewed as marketable back in the early 1960s. And then secondly, the fact that it was a writer invited onto the program, a television writer. I can't think of none off the top of my head of any television writers who have appeared on any of those current late night talk shows. The Hollywood Reporter does series on the different craftspeople behind the scenes, interviewing the top of the craft, generally during the Oscar, when the Oscars are announced, or the Golden Globes. So there you'll have television writers, television directors, movie writers, movie directors. But that is very insidery, even if there is more of a broad appeal than such insider programs tend to have. But the fact that Rod Serling was a name says a lot. And so all of this adds to my perception that Rod got away with a lot that he shouldn't have because of his inherent talent, because he wrote so quickly. And again, because I was able to compare that the original short story and the first adaptation with his, I can see missed opportunities. So another way that the Tales of Tomorrow adaptation of What You Need, I think, was different, in this case superior, it was in that we get more of a grounded motivating factor for Renaud, in that rather than just him being greedy and avarice and a bully, in the original and in the adaptation, he is a journalist who is just trying to make a break. He's just trying to get ahead. He's not inherently trying to make as much money for as little work as possible. And so that makes him a little bit more relatable, and the fact that we see him with his girlfriend also makes him a little bit more relatable. And the scene where he saves his life due to Padat's telling him to bring those scissors with him everywhere is more integral to the character in the original than it is in Rod Serling's reworking. So in the TV show, the Tales of Tomorrow, Renard is in his newspaper office or magazine office pitching the story about this guy who can give gifts to anyone who really needs it. And while he's in there trying to hustle, he inadvertently gets his tie caught in the printing press. And that is what drags him down. And while he's starting to get dragged into the machine, his boss and another woman there try to free him. And so it's a lot more believable, firstly. And secondly, the fact that he gets it caught in the printing press is ironic, and that his ambition to succeed in this industry inadvertently almost causes him to die. And whereas in Rod Serling's version, we get the slow elevator, the slow elevator drop to death, which was never going to kill anyone, because even without the scissors, it was so slow. You just have to untie the knot and then get out, and you're done. So the staging of that didn't work. It didn't work in conception, and it didn't really reveal anything about the character. It was just an accident. Like, nothing about his character gets his tie caught in that elevator, but chance. But in the Tales of Tomorrow version, everything about his character gets his tie caught in that printing press, because he is there due to the fact that he works as a writer. He's there due to the fact he's trying to exploit a story to advance in his career, and that's what leads for him to be in the circumstance where his tie gets caught, ironically, in the printing press. So those are my thoughts. I guess maybe not what you're getting from me is I enjoyed it, but I didn't think it was as good as some of the previous episodes, and I don't think it stands among the best of the series. And the reason for that is missed opportunities in developing the character of Padat. Sorry, not Padat, Renard. Padat, I feel, even though he doesn't have the wife that he has in the original series, we can empathize for him. He gets our sympathy. So because he's such a generous character, the actor does a really fine job of portraying the warmth of that character. And so I don't have any issue with that. But the villain, I think, came off as just one-dimensional in Rod Serling's version. And so Rod missed a good chance of developing complicated feelings in the audience towards the villain, which I think would have given the whole episode a little more weight. And so that's what I got. Please leave your thoughts on this episode. What do you think about it? It did get an 8.1 on IMDb, and that's out of 2,500 votes. So that's a decent score. Others apparently did not have some of the qualms or quibbles that I had with it. But again, because I watched the earlier version, I could see some of the missed opportunities, and maybe I would have been a little higher on this episode if I hadn't seen that first. But my whole goal in this is to examine the writing of Rod Serling and the elements of the show, which will include directing and acting. But the main focus is on the writing. So I need to pay attention to where each episode shines and where it misses the mark. Anyways, that's all for now. So please join me again here, and until next time, take care and be well. Goodbye.